This is a good segue to now zoom in and focus on this quite lovely, monumental piece of sculpture by Marcus Maria Jung. This piece is called Union, probably one of the most evocative and favorite images of my own. I spoke and emailed with Marcus. This is wood, a manzanita wood, that Marcus found and salvaged from Glass Mountain shortly following the Glass Mountain fire. And as I mentioned to you all earlier, I now live at the base of Glass Mountain. And Marcus has an incredibly innate ability to take what was left, what was discarded, what was perhaps burned, sort of an element of destruction and devastation, if you will, and fashion and sculpt and transform it into the most beautiful of objects. Just note how incredible the graining of the wood base is here. It's so smoothly rendered and sculpted, soft, almost velvety texture to it, the rounded sides and corners, the inlay that also makes it a quite extraordinary form in of itself. But obviously, taking the vertical line up from there, he's found two very sinuous and sort of matched pieces of wood, this manzanita branch that he saw form, he saw unity in, therein lying the title of the piece. This is a piece that when, of course, we are open and safely can walk the gallery, I would invite any one of you to come and feel and touch from a tactile standpoint. It is the most beautiful interactive piece. The wood has a silken, velvety, soft texture to it, such graining, such depth. It's quite extraordinary. And you know, his pieces again have kind of a living nature about them. You can only imagine how extraordinary it would be to have this in an entryway of your home. I really appreciate this piece, and it really is fundamentally grounded in our region here. So quite extraordinary.
Manzanitas, of course, are one of our, I mean, they're everywhere.
Indigenous.
Not only are they everywhere, but they're also a first responder to the fire. You know, they are some of the plants that come back the fastest after a fire.
Yeah, very regenerative. So Marcus Maria Jung, Unity. So we'll move on to new work. A new artist that I'd like to introduce to all of you this evening, Eric Hunter. So here we've got Eric Hunter's pieces, Human Detritus 1 and 2. This is oil, alkyd, emulsion on wood panel. Wonderful texture, great depth of color, just a very, this is the type of piece I call a very physical piece, where you can see the artist's hand in the surface so tangibly, and it really kind of draws you in and allows you to sort of imagine the process of the creation and interact with the form as it speaks to you both texturally as well as visually. I think we have Eric here with us, if I'm not mistaken. Eric, are you still with us?
I'm here.
Hey, terrific. Hi, Eric.
Hello.
Glad to have you be a part of this. Welcome to the Middletown Arts Center.
Yes, it's great to actually step foot in Lake County virtually.
Yes, exactly. If I understand correctly, Eric, you are a Sonoma County-based artist. Am I correct?
That's correct. My wife and I actually grew up in Napa, but my wife and I moved back to Sonoma County after living on the East Coast for several years, just a year ago, and bought a home down here.
Can you tell us a little bit more about, well, the name, Human Detritus, and what inspired this work and this theme?
My pleasure. Actually, the entire title to this series is Human Detritus Ready Made. So I was having a little fun with the Dada artists and the idea of a ready-made and taking manufactured items that were highly engineered and just, signed arm mutt or attaching a bicycle wheel to a stool and stepping back and calling it art. And so I am playing around a little bit with that idea, except it's on the other end of the lifetime of these man-made objects. They were originally inspired by a book. Actually, I should hold it up. I actually pulled it out here. I also have a love of plants and love to garden, and I'm getting to re-experience that after not having a garden for over 10 years. And that's always been important to me and has become important to my process. And I stumbled onto this book. I think somebody gave it to me for a gift. I'd never heard of Derek Jarman, who's a filmmaker. Here's the book.
Yeah, terrific.
And it's about his garden, which has become, pretty famous, actually. It's become a kind of a place to visit if you're going to the southern coast of England. But what inspired me were the images in the book. For those of you that don't know, and I'll try and be brief, but Derek Jarman was an independent filmmaker. I knew nothing of him. I don't know much about his work actually per se, but I loved the idea of his garden and how he constructed it and put it together. And he was diagnosed with AIDS in 1986. And that's about the same time he purchased this little salt box on the southern coast of England. And the garden, it's not a very habitable place for plants, probably, or people either. There's a nuclear power plant close by. And the soil really is gravel and not a whole lot of nutrients in it. So if the plants don't like salt, they don't do well there. And he managed to create a beautiful garden out of these very rugged plants and these items he would find that washed up on the southern coast of England, which you can only imagine what might wash up on that particular coastline, given what's happened in the English Channel over the last several centuries. But these objects in my paintings were inspired by photographs of these objects that he took and planted in his garden. And they are actually sculptures that broke off of ships or from shipwrecks, and it's basically flotsam that floated up onto the shore. And it totally intrigued me, this idea of a chunk of wood like the one on the left, the ochre piece, the number one, is this monumental chunk of wood that broke off an old wooden ship, God knows when, that he found. And it's just planted in the soil. I think it might be 4 or 5 feet tall. If you see it in person, I'd have to thumb through the pages to double check. But I couldn't, even if I were a sculptor, a wood carver, I think it would take me years and years to achieve the kind of form that whatever man did to create it when it was first made, and then the sea and weather did to it over the decades and centuries, would create these just incredibly beautiful objects. At least to me, most people would probably throw them in the trash bin, but artists are a little different, I think.
Right, and detritus can inspire us. I mean, it's largely our creation anyway. So if we can see the beauty in what's left behind,
absolutely.
And this piece right next to it is also so intriguing. The kites, Eric. Can you speak just briefly to that also for us?
Well, again, this series was rooted in this same inspiration. And this object that really kind of transformed throughout the process of making the painting. Of course, I was looking at photographs and started to pay more attention to just chunks of stuff laying around that are taken for granted. But this is another one of these pieces out of his garden, and they were just inspirations, a place to jump off, and then let the addiction to paint take over from there. And I think originally this object was some sort of piece of farm equipment. You know,
Okay.
it looked kind of like a strange looking rake, and those kite-like shapes were actually rusty metal with, it came to a point and maybe you could dig in the earth. But I just loved the form and loved playing with it, and just and just kind of followed the paint. I like to make marks and then be inspired by the work and let it tell me what to do. I don't always have a plan of, I rarely have a plan of what it's going to look like when I'm finished.
Well, it's a process, isn't it? What I'm also seeing in your work, Eric, the juxtaposition of these two pieces is, detritus can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. However, this work is very joyful and it's very uplifting. So I see different things in them, and well, of course, the use of color. Two very different thematic fields, but they influence each other. It's really lovely. We're so pleased to have you be a part of things. Thank you.
No, thank you. It's my pleasure. I'm happy to participate.
Lovely.
And you're going to get to meet my wife here, I think, in just a moment.
I think we are going to get to meet your wife. And how often does that happen, that we can have a husband and wife showing together in the same exhibit? So without further delay, it's my pleasure to introduce to all of you another wonderful new artist to the Middletown Art Center and to this exhibit of home, Julia Feldman. I think Julia's also here. She's joined us.
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Julia. Hello.
Hi. Hello.
Had the pleasure of meeting you in person just the other day. It's just delightful, and ever more so just to be here this evening for our opening. These are wonderful, wonderful pieces. They're fiber art pieces, and I'd like to just announce them by title because I found them very evocative. The first piece on the left is called Freedom Walk, and the second piece, the larger piece, is called Admit One Elephant. And the first time I read that, I thought, okay. And then the second time, I walked past it just earlier this evening, and I thought, oh, I get that. Well, for me anyway, there was an irony to that, a great irony that I felt.
That's good.
So please give us a few words on this wonderful work, the use of your mixed media, the use of your wonderful technique and skill in embroidery, and this lyrical quality that your work has.
So Freedom Walk, all of my work has some kind of a political home feeling to it. This is all part of a series of having to do a lot with immigration and my grandparents that came through Ellis Island and saw the Statue of Liberty, and then moving on to Admit One Elephant, which has the Tea Party, and what have we become, and why do we want to be here right at the moment? And I use a lot of found materials. I do hand and machine embroidery. I print. This particular one, the Admit One Elephant, is based. It sort of has a flag-like look in Africa. When the British left, they turned the flags over and used them to do their artwork on because they no longer needed them to fly. But this one it's just remnants of life, like what we want, what we're losing, how angry things have been. I did this at a time when the world was being really mean, and yet hopeful. There's a Petaluma chicken up in the corner.
Beautifully rendered as well. There's such detail.
Thank you. And the monkey on the evolution monkey it's all teetering on the teacups, eating an apple.
Well, there's a journey to your piece as well.
Yes.
You sort of feel that you travel through it, and it's very storytelling and very evocative.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah.
It's incorporated. It's lovely.
Thank you.
Julia, can you tell us more about, Michael, Inside the Little Room is another piece by Julia. And I have to say that something that we've introduced to this show by virtue of the participating artists is actually a tiny bit of a Jewish element, which, in a place like Lake County is quite rare, actually. And Julia, if you would be so kind as to speak to the aspect of Tikkun Olam, or mending the world, that you've included in this little tiny piece that you have here in particular. And also, this is part of my work as well. And Jonah, who is from the Kabart Ecology Project, also has some work that deals not so much necessarily with Tikkun Olam, but maybe with Tikkun Atzmi, which would be mending of self and mending of self in relation to place. And place, of course, is home.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I don't know if he can get to the pieces to show them. Those tiny pieces on the right of the wall.
The series, Michael.
There we go. A little bit.
These are lovely. These are they're so intricate.
And these again are home. This is the story of my grandparents leaving Hungary during the pogroms and sailing across and ending up in Ellis Island, kind of caged, where they poked and prodded and make sure somebody could come in. They lived in tenements, and the garment industry, which I've also been in. And at the end is the Friday night Shabbat prayer, because for them, everything had meaning. They were very religious, and Tikkun Olam was part of our upbringing. We had this little can where you put money in to share. There was always, everybody has enough to share, no matter what is, if we have just a little bit, we can share a little of that to somebody that has less. And so most of my work has a component of changing, repairing, movement and growth. And so these pieces are really special to me because they show a passage of time and then home. That whole just safety of feeling like you belong in your heart.
That's a universal theme that whether we know it or not, we're all seeking.
Absolutely.
It's just occurred to me that even the sort of action of stitching in itself is sort of reparative. We stitch things back together, don't we?
Both reparative, both reparative and storytelling, like step after step, stitch after stitch.
Mm-hmm.
And it was this grandmother who taught me to stitch when I was really young and had me making things, clothes by 8. But it was with her that I learned that a needle and thread could make magic and talk and tell a story.
Mm.
And I also spent time behind, when she went to the synagogue, we were upstairs behind a curtain and watching. And that all those pieces sort of come into where we're going and where we've been as people.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
So important to have the opportunity to hear your inspiration and what personally goes into your work. It's truly what brings the work to life, and why these conversations are, I think, integral